Hey, Amit.
How are you, Andrew? You all right?
All good, all good. A touch under the weather with a bit of a cold that's hanging around. That's why you can probably hear this, what I guess, booming voice, as it were. I'm an absolute trooper, so I couldn't kind of disappoint our fans and kind of cry off. So yeah, I'm here, cold and all. How are you? How's your week been?
Yeah, good, good. Yeah, very good. Actually, managed to play some golf, so I'm quite happy.
That's insane.
Doesn't happen so
That's
often.
Yeah, that's. I think we should timestamp that because I genuinely can't remember the last time you said I played golf.
Yeah, I've been super, super cautious during sort of COVID times and not wanting to kind of share buggies and all that nonsense. But yeah, it is what it is. But yeah, it all good with you, apart from being
Yes.
a little sick.
Yeah. It's a busy week. We kind of find ourselves here in November, which genuinely blows me away. So I think October was a busy month. November seems to be a busy month as well already, and we're only a few days in. So I think that's positive all round, really. As much as there's some craziness going on, obviously with our friends over the water. So we'll find out what shakes down in the next couple of days. See if there's outright democracy or complete full anarchy. But what I guess the world will be watching over there, our friends, our American cousins. But yeah, other than that, it's good. I think everything's positive. But yeah, so I guess aside from you and I just talking, there are people watching, so we should probably say hello to those as well. Hi everyone, welcome to the Digital Growth Show. So we are now on episode 26. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you're listening to the podcast. Again, this is your kind of weekly check-in with us. We've been slogging away at this now for since March, I guess. April, is it April? I think we started.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting we find ourselves here. We've got a cracking topic to kind of plow through today. I think a bit off piste, as it were. So last week we said we changed the dynamics of the show. If for those of you that haven't had a chance to listen, watch yet, we basically ran through. We had a whole series on 2021, and it was like, okay, what can you do in 2021? We had feedback saying, listen, what about now? So last week's show was all about now. What could we do now? And again, this week we had people reach out to us. So thank you. You can reach us by LinkedIn, myself and Amit, or growthshow@digitalnexa.com. And we had some more requests, right, Amit? What was our kind of viewers, listeners? What were they asking this week?
Yeah, I think they were just kind of, there was a couple of comments that came in. And I think the first one was very much kind of, how do we kind of, do what you guys are doing from a content perspective? And is it applicable for their business, which was cool. And then we had another question that was basically, again, focused on content. So people who are kind of now looking at 2021, obviously, this was on the back of the lockdown announcement. So I think a lot of people now are feeling as if there's probably not going to be many kind of events next year. And so they're kind of looking at other ways of kind of replacing that, staying visible. And yeah, from a content perspective, it makes total sense. So yeah, it kind of made sense for us to really kind of focus on content this week, right?
That's right. Yeah. So we are all about the content. That's pretty much what it is. And as you said there, I mean, obviously, with news of parts of Europe back in lockdown, obviously our fair country kind of heading back into lockdown as well. I guess this Thursday, right, or Friday.
Yeah.
It's when we kind of looked at this and we dug into this content. So I mean, do you think let's take over the last kind of 8 months, now? I mean, do you think we're kind of consuming more or less content? What do you think? I mean, even from your perspective.
Yeah. Definitely more. I mean, and again, it's different types of content, I guess. But yeah, I'm spending a lot more time on my mobile, definitely in front of a laptop. And obviously that makes sense because we're doing a lot more kind of things like this and Zoom meetings and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I'm spending, I'd say easily another 2 to 3 hours a day in front of a device. What about you?
Yeah, 100%. So
Yeah,
I'm definitely on here more. As you said, you know, the migration from online physical meet. I've had one physical meeting in the last 5 weeks now,
right.
face to face. Everything
Yeah,
else is, and that includes new prospects, existing customers, brand new customers, you know, suppliers, partners, staff, you know, team, whatever. Um, that's all been on here, and obviously
yeah,
ultimately on here. And even when I have been out, let's say to go, you know, go shops or whatever, I've been on my device, usually on a Zoom call. So I've
yeah,
definitely kind of you know, spent more time on these digital devices and thus consuming content.
yeah,
So aside from the you know, other like, you know, Zoom meetings, there's creating content like this, proposals, etc., and then
yeah.
obviously content consumption. So if I'm not, you know, there, I'm listening to a podcast, or I'm watching a podcast, or I'm watching a new training video on the new TikTok or whatever.
Hmm. So, yeah, so I mean, so that's where you're kind of spending more of your time now. I think there was, I mean, I shared an article with you earlier in the week,
Yeah,
which kind of cemented this, but it's always good when you see kind of real numbers, right? Just to
yeah.
kind of, I guess, check that we're not, you know, the weird ones out there, and you know, all that kind of stuff.
As usual.
But this was kind of like a relatively small study, but it, you know, it's 10,000 people based in 5 different countries.
Yeah,
And on average, people's online content consumption has doubled in 2020. You know, which I felt was huge, right?
massive.
And they were saying that on average, people are now spending 6 to 7 hours per day in front of their devices. Literally, people are spending now close to, or almost 2/3 of their kind of waking life. You know, the hours when they were kind of, you know, wide awake and doing
Yeah,
things. 2/3 of that time, sorry, a third of that time is now being spent in front of a device, right?
yeah,
Um, but like averages, you know, there's going to be kind of outliers, kind of either side of that, right?
yeah, exactly.
And what they did find, which was really interesting, is that actually there's a lot of people now who are spending between 10 and 12 hours a day on devices and non devices sort of consuming content.
Yeah, yeah. That, I mean, that's Forbes, right? I think you said it was Forbes magazine.
Yeah,
That
as
was
a
the
Forbes,
article you shared with
yeah,
me.
yeah,
So it's
yeah.
yeah. I mean, and we read that on Forbes, consuming content again.
Right, exactly. Yeah, because I mean, and again, that kind of goes into this, right? There's a lot more people out there consuming content, which ultimately means there's a greater demand for content, and I think what's happening is more people are sort of creating content, and it's not. I think that same article, I'm pretty sure it was that one. Um, it wasn't what we kind of normally expect, where okay, right, it's just TV or streaming services.
Yeah,
It's not just those which have sort of increased in consumption, right? We've got people who are on furlough, you know, they're in lockdown, so they're not allowed to work, we're not allowed to leave the house. And so you kind of naturally assume that a lot of that kind of, you know, time and traffic is going towards kind of streaming services. But still, social media was ahead. News apps and kind of, you know, news channels were second, and then you've got kind of streaming services in third. So I guess, you know, I think that also says a lot, because I don't know about you, Andrew. I'm spending a little bit less time watching TV, I think, than I was doing before.
yeah,
Routines are very different because obviously we're not kind of traveling, you know, to and from, you know, meetings and from the office and things like that. But that time hasn't sort of transferred directly into Netflix, for example, right?
no, yeah,
Well, not for me anyway. It's kind of, you know, maybe gone into maybe a few more hours on the laptop and you know, maybe a bit more time on a mobile. But yeah, I don't know. What about you?
yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, there's a bit of a blip this last week because Mandalorian season 2 is on Disney, so that's very important. So that's probably the most amount of TV, and that's only under 45 minutes, obviously. But my time actually, interestingly, has kind of moved over to YouTube. I find myself just because I'm more naturally on the device, the laptop. I'm on YouTube more, and even on my phone, I'm on YouTube. Even to the point where I was considering paying for subscription, where you can. So because obviously on the iPhone, you're unable to minimize, YouTube while you lock your screen. So I was even considering that because of the amount of time in there. But you touched upon something there was quite interesting with furlough. So I don't know if you have any friends on furlough. I do. I have friends on furlough back home. Obviously, the scheme, where the government's subsidising and employees can't work, and I guess there's been a bit of a shift with their consumption. So of content. It was very much, I think, yeehaw for some of my mates. It was very much yeehaw. Then there was a realization that, oh, hold on a minute, my wife and kids at home as well. So there was, kind of a different one, but a yeehaw in the sense, I got my own time. I can watch a bit of Netflix. I can catch up on The Wire. I've never seen it. I can watch Breaking Bad. I've never seen it. And then that's kind of dissipated now and moved more into, well, how can I, I'm desperate to work, or I'm desperate to like the thirst for knowledge, right? There's only so much you can do nothing. I think, a lot of people, and there's some people that are happy with that, but there's a lot of people that are obviously working and miss working, and miss learning. I think we're all avid learners, on a day-to-day basis. And I found that a lot of those guys now are spending time on YouTube or signing up for online courses, to kind of digest content, but valuable content, let's say.
Yeah, I think self-education is huge at the moment. And I think, it goes back to a comment that we kind of mentioned a couple of weeks back, where more people are seemingly spending time on platforms like LinkedIn, where they kind of might learn stuff, rather than kind of just flicking through maybe Instagram. And I think there's kind of like an evolution that's kind of going on from that perspective. But I mean, going back to if you're on furlough, or even if you're not on furlough, there's a lot of people whose jobs are at risk at the moment. And what do you do, right? You've got to stay maybe relevant. You've got to stay, kind of ahead of a game in terms of knowledge, in terms of different trends. And I think there's a lot of people at the moment who are using online channels and online platforms, to stay kind of educated, to stay kind of, in the know. In the event that they kind of need to either go back to work or look for another job, or whatever that looks like, they need to do something new in their business. But so I think there's a lot of that's going on at the moment. And I think, Andrew, look, in all fairness, for podcast numbers, I mean, the amount of people that are listening into shows like ours, I mean, it's huge at the moment.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think the flip of that as well is actually the content creation piece. So I think as much as, people are digesting more content, as you said, that kind of knock-on effect is people ultimately producing more content for people to listen and for people to watch and fill that gap. And I think I've seen a real shift of kind of friends and colleagues who are creating their own content now, right? Who are kind of creating podcasts, who are putting little videos on LinkedIn, or writing blogs, or contributing to other people's blogs, right? There's this kind of real shift and drive to start that. And look, even with ourselves, right? I mean, this show every week, as we said, 26 weeks in now, the podcast that we're producing, you and I are working on, potentially doing another show and another podcast. So there's definitely an appetite, to create more content, because ultimately people are watching and listening and reading and right?
Yeah, exactly. And look, I think we should touch on why we're doing this, because the reality is that the impact that us creating content has had on the business has been significant. And I think it came at a time when we were looking at, again, uncertainty in a business, uncertainty in the market around us. We were looking at potentially reducing, marketing budgets and things like that. And we kind of looked at, what are really the kind of most cost-effective ways? What is it that we would kind of advise a client that looked exactly like us? What would we advise them to do? And I think when we spoke about this, from our perspective, it was all about visibility, right? There was two kind of approaches. One is that you kind of maybe don't do anything, perhaps kind of head in sand mentality.
Yeah.
And the other is you kind of go all guns blazing and be as visible, and share. Look, you can't just be visible. I think you've got to share kind of valuable content. You've got to,
Yeah.
try and, you've got to try and teach people something, even if it's a small snippet that they can sort of take away.
Exactly.
We obviously don't know the answers to everything, but the point is that if we can kind of pass on some of our knowledge and experience and do it in a way across multiple kind of content channels, it may help, and actually it has helped. And like I said, we're 26 weeks in, and it's difficult for us to think about stopping this now because um, because it's habit and it's having an impact on the business, right?
Yeah. It's a runaway train, mate. A runaway success train. That's that's what you're searching for.
Yeah.
No, it's true. I think the thing is that when we did look at this, it was very much how, if people are out there looking for ways to improve themselves or ways to improve their organization, or potentially even engage with us at a kind of an investment level, what could be the best way to kind of help them. And that's why we've got that kind of wide range of subjects. And as you said, ultimately we wanted to make this enjoyable and for people to take some value away, right?
Yeah, but also, I mean, how long did we talk about this for before we did it? I mean, like
6 years.
Right. Like, but
No.
genuinely,
I
wasn't
think Gen 3. I think I remember. Well, actually, a lot of it was directed at me, to be fair. So I think going back, sitting in a Marcus Sheridan session, possibly 3-4 years ago, I remember you leaning into me and going, "Mate, we've got to do this. This is you. Like, this is us. We've got to get on video. We've got to start something." I was like, "Definitely, 100%." And then the following year, after not doing it, I think again we were at the same session. And then even actually last year, I think I did the first video from there. And that was IG video.
Yeah.
I think I can timestamp it. But yeah, it's taken let's say 4 years. I'd say 4 years.
Yeah, exactly. I think for the first year I kind of gently leaned in and said, "Andrew, we need to do this." I think the next year was more of an elbow, right? It was
yeah. And then on the third year, I
not
decided not to sit next to you in the session. And actually, I may have even last year not been in the session because I knew that you may have lent in again. So I think it was easier just not to turn up.
But the point is like none of this stuff is easy, right? And it's not necessarily not easy in the sense of going out and doing it, but it's comfort levels, I think, is one thing, right? I mean, it's you're putting yourself out there, and I kind of, from my perspective, I feel as if I'm better kind of writing about things as opposed to video. I know you're kind of much more kind of visual than I am and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And like I said, we're all different, right? But I think it was a case of I think at some point, because content marketing is so cost effective, okay. So it's not, it's not a case of, I think the first webinar I ever ran was 6 years ago, and we did a ton of marketing behind it and all that kind of stuff, and I had 4 people who joined, right? And it was just different because it just wasn't sort of accepted, in the same way it is today, and people don't, the technology is not really there and all that kind of, it was a horrible platform and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I think the first thing is I think once we understood that actually this could be really impactful for the business, the second part is, okay, we've just got to be brave enough to do it, right?
Yeah.
And
exactly.
whatever that looked like. And I know in the early days of our sort of content marketing, I'd be saying to you, Andrew, like, I need you to write an article. And I know your comfort levels aren't necessarily there with that, right? Perhaps in the same way where, we're like, look, let's do a show. And I was kind of maybe apprehensive about doing it from my side.
Yeah.
But I guess with anything, once you do it, you've done it, right? And it becomes the second time's always easier.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the thing is that it has helped. This has helped with Zoom calls as well. So the projection and the way you hold yourself and everything associated to look into camera. So there's definitely other skills. And look, I guess the idea, guys, today, for girls, for listening and watching, is that you know, the second part of the show, we're going to take you through some of these tools that we've started to use. So you know, ones that we've been using for many years, and then also, you know, with the new show, you know, live broadcast, these kind of things, we're going to actually kind of give you a series of tools that you can use as well, to produce your own content or make recommendation from there as well.
Yeah, and I think, well, we should just probably go into that, I think, because we've got there's yeah, and guys, I think just before we kind of get into that, let's I think let's be quite clear here that a lot of what happens on a content production perspective, the podcast, you know, the recording, it's actually me and Andrew that's kind of taken control of the bulk of that. We get a little bit of help from our team, you know, just to kind of help promote the show and to do a little bit of editing. But the main reason is we also understand that people are busy. And I think the more we kind of explored this, the more we kind of realized that actually the tools are so readily available. They're not cost prohibitive in any way. And actually there's no reason why we can't produce, you know, a show, a podcast, you know, articles, whatever it is, right? And you know, we can do it without it being too resource intensive, which basically means that the cost stays lower. And also just means that the turnaround time's quicker because less people are involved. So, you know, again, it's one of those where if you haven't sort of considered, you know, creating, you know, a wide range of content for your business because you're worried about the resources, the time commitment, the investment, you know, from a kind of software perspective, all of these things, I think what we're going to try and do, you know, for the next part of the show is just kind of explain all the tools that we use, the tools that we've tested, and the tools that are really kind of very easily kind of implementable and easy to work with. Because I think the UX side of it is really kind of improved now. You know, when you look at some of the older technology versus what's available today, you just don't need to be a technical person at all. You don't need to be a whiz on, you know, Photoshop and all of those kinds of things. It's literally, you know, here's a tool that just makes life incredibly easy for you. So, so yeah. So I think let's crack on with that, Andrew. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think I think you know, we also content as well. You know, we're talking blogs, podcasts, you know, shows, webinars. You know, these are the things that we're talking about, guys.
Yeah.
So, you know, any way that we're kind of digesting content, this is kind of what we wanted to take you through. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's start with blogs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So look, if you guys aren't, you know, if you own a business or you're you know, in charge of marketing for a business, if I was ever to give a recommendation on the one thing that every company should do, it would be have an active blog. Okay. And the reason for that is kind of, you know, there's just so many, right? So the first thing is, firstly, it gives you kind of meaningful content. So again, whether you're B2B or B2C, it gives you content that you can market across all of your other platforms. Okay, so if we look at your blog on one side, and if we look at things like social media, email, your website, all of those on the other side are all kind of distribution platforms. And the main thing you need is content, right? So if you have got content, and if you've got really kind of good quality content in the form of blog articles, you've suddenly now got, you know, a multitude of different sort of channels where you can start to distribute this content. So it's never how it used to be back in the day, which was right up and only until Google maybe pick up on that article would people see it. You know, now basically you can write an article today, publish it, and then get it live, and people can literally see it within minutes. You know, so that's the first thing. That's the first thing I'd say. Andrew, blogs for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think what I would say is blogs linked to podcasts. So, you know, that comfort level where you may not necessarily you don't enjoy writing. You know, it's not particularly a passion, or you may find it frustrating or challenging. There are tools out there like Rev, like Otter, that will take your podcast and transcribe it. So basically, you know, from a podcast, and then maybe, you know, just a 5-minute podcast or a 10-minute podcast, or even audio text, obviously, it will just transcribe. So don't feel bound by, I've got to sit there in front of my laptop and type out a blog. Obviously, you've got opportunity to vocalize that if you want, if you feel more comfortable. So, you know, I'd say that from a tool perspective, there is we're going to talk about Dscript a bit more in a bit, but there's Otter and Rev. Those are kind of two of the big ones. There's also Temi as well. But these are kind of platforms that allow you to go in and take audio and transcribe it, or record audio and then transcribe it.
Okay, cool. So that makes that easier. The other thing is let's look at it from a kind of content hosting or publishing perspective. So not everyone obviously has maybe a blog on their website, although again, today it's so easy to do that. Really kind of think about how you want to do that. Adding a simple WordPress blog, you know, or other platforms is really kind of easier than ever. So think about doing that. But if you don't, and if you don't want to speak to IT and you don't want to kind of have those conversations or delay this any further, two platforms that I would kind of very highly recommend. The first would be Medium. So, you know, publish content, create an account on Medium, takes 30 seconds. And it's such a great platform to sort of help create content, you know, blog articles, all of that kind of stuff. The sort of added benefit of Medium is, from a search engine perspective, Google absolutely loves it. So you get all of the benefit of Medium search engine juice for your own article. So the way that Google would look at it is they see an article, it's hosted on Medium, and actually it would get probably even more ranking capabilities than if you did post it on your own website. So Medium is a very kind of viable option. And the second one is LinkedIn as well. So, you know, again, LinkedIn make it very easy now. You can start kind of writing your own blog articles, you know, even your own newsletters now you can have on and host on LinkedIn. So, so again, very kind of easy ways to kind of, you know, download any kind of information from your mind onto the screen and to get it into multiple channels. Yeah. Anything else on blogs? Yeah.
No, I think someone's just mentioned, can you mention the platform for creating blog content? So yeah, I mean those obviously, as Amit mentioned, I mean you can use Medium and LinkedIn, or obviously, you know, just take one of the I think if you're asking about Rev, so REV, or Otter, OTTER. Those are the two. If you just type in Otter blogcast, blogcast, there we go. There's a new one. Podcast transcribe. You can look at those. But yeah, I think that's you know, again, and blogs. I mean, when we're looking at blogs, I mean, what kind of numbers are we talking about? You know, if as a recommendation, you know, is it like 200 words, 400, 600, 8? What's the kind of? Is there any guide on that?
Depends on the purpose. So if you're creating a blog article because you want that to rank at the top of Google, it comes down to how many people are talking about the same topic or the same subject. But you know, if that's your objective, you know, we'd normally say anywhere between 1,000 to 1,200 words should be the minimum. But in all honesty, if you just want to create a blog because you want to create valuable content, don't worry about a word count, right? So, you know, again, because you know, look, from our strategy is very much we want Google to see and rank our content. Another person's strategy is maybe just creating short form blog articles and then distributing those through LinkedIn and Facebook and things like that. So in that scenario, don't be obsessed about don't obsess about the word count. Just make sure what you're creating is of a decent quality.
Okay, cool. And we've had a question in as well about frequency, and I guess we'll answer that at the end. Just as far as, you know, how much content we should produce and kind of level of frequency. So I think we'll kind of dive in at the end. But yeah, okay, that's good, I think, for blogs. Yeah,
well, actually, I mean, we can touch on that very quickly. But from a blog perspective, in terms of frequency, you know, really it should be as frequent as you can. Okay, so we don't kind of buy into this, you know, one a month or, you know, 2 a month or anything like that. But if you're happy to create content, you know, a couple of hours you put on the side every week, and you know, you create one kind of article a week, you know, it's great. I mean, think about everything that we're talking about here, guys. I think it's just that it's about sustainability, and it's about doing things not just as a one-time hit, but things that you can sort of continue doing again and again and again, because that's where you start to see the value. It's not from just doing sort of, one webinar or one podcast or writing one article. And again, I think it's Michael who asked that question. If you're looking to position yourself as a thought leader, you can't do it with one piece, right? It's you've got to be kind of consistent in your approach and consistent in terms of the content you'll create.
Yeah, and committed.
Yeah.
This isn't it's not something to take lightly. When you start producing content, people start enjoying your content, sharing it, asking questions on the back of it. It's important to understand that there is a commitment to that. So I mean, I guess still in that kind of written form, if we're taking blogs to the next level, as it were, and we want to kind of flash it up a bit, things like downloadable guides, white papers, that's I guess a bit different, because ultimately someone is potentially giving you their email in exchange for this downloadable guide, or you may be running a campaign on the back of it. So I mean, how we kind of making these look a bit better, or kind of how we getting them out there?
Yeah. Okay. Look, first and foremost, in terms of the content, the absolute best way of creating a downloadable guide or white paper potentially is combining different blog articles. Okay, so what you don't want to do is, and again, Andrew, I think we'll talk about this in a second, but we're masters at reusing content. Okay, so what we don't want to do is kind of spend the hours and hours and hours creating new bits of content again and again and again. But if you do have some sort of structure and you say, right, for the next 4 weeks, I'm going to be speaking about restaurant menus. Okay, just to kind of bring Michael back into the loop. But if that's going to be my topic, then I'm going to find 4 different angles about restaurant menus. And then at the end of those 4 weeks, you've actually got 4 bits of content. Now, potentially, you could reuse that content, package it all in together, and create a downloadable guide about restaurant menus, right?
Right.
And so you don't have to go out and sort of recreate a downloadable guide and all that kind of stuff. You use that, you kind of repurpose that same content. But now, in terms of how you kind of produce that downloadable guide, because obviously a blog article looks very different to a downloadable piece. You want to use tools again which are easy. Now, again, back in the day, those tools were essentially Photoshop or InDesign or any of those kind of complicated things that neither of us are very good at, right? But today we use Canva. Okay, so again, if you guys haven't used Canva before, it's Canva, so canva.com, and Canva is probably one of the most phenomenal bits of software or online SaaS tools that I just think have been available in the last probably 2 or 3 years, which I just think have just really kind of changed the way people produce kind of visual content now, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's kind of, I guess it's almost filled that gap where we used to produce PowerPoint presentations, and you'd kind of manipulate images and drag and drop. And I remember when they first did drag and drop, and it was revolutionary. But Canva's taken it to a whole nother level. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that are using Canva to produce social media kind of posts and templates and a whole host of other things. But it's definitely a game changer.
Yeah, I mean, to the point where even right now, if we've got a new ebook or an e-guide that's ready, and I can't book in enough design resource because they're busy, me and the content team would literally just go into Canva and literally create an ebook, and the templates are there and it's free, right? Again, you even a pro account is $12 a month, but the free account is free, and you can literally choose a template, a nice kind of ebook or downloadable guide template, put the text in, and then literally comes out like it's been kind of professionally designed. But there's a story I forgot to tell you, Andrew. So we've obviously launched a magazine. We'll come into that in a second. But the first draft of the magazine, our content writers created it on Canva. Okay, and then we it was just so that we got to get an idea in terms of look and feel and all that kind of stuff. And then we said, right, let's bring in one of our designers to kind of now make it look a little bit better. And so so one of our designers, Shima, we called her in and said, look, can you kind of transform this? And it's in Canva. And she's like, what's Canva? And we're talking about a 20-year experienced graphic designer. I mean, very seasoned, very experienced. And it was almost like I felt nervous introducing it to Canva, because in my mind, and even now I should be careful, but in my mind, potentially Canva's a tool that makes graphic designers potentially redundant 5 or 10 years from now, right? And so I said to her, like, very sheepishly, I gave her my account details. I said, log in and have a look. And then I spoke to her afterwards, and she was like, Canva's unbelievable. And I was like, I know. I was like, what's your thoughts on it? She goes, it's cool, but it's scary. And I knew exactly why, because suddenly now all this complex stuff that these designers do, we can all do. But yeah, sorry, I sidetracked. But it was a little bit.
No, I think basically it's just, as you said, it's just making these things relatively accessible, right? So some of the things, I think the only reason that we're able to produce this volume of content is because there are tools out there which we're sharing today that allow you to master some of those activities that you've never previously been able to do. Simple as that.
Yeah. So okay, let's kind of move on. So once you've got something produced, so you've created the text, you've gone into Canva, made it look professional now. What do you do from a kind of publishing and distribution perspective? Do you want to tackle that, Andrew?
Yeah. So ultimately it's out there. So what do you want to do? Well, what you really want to do is you want to start looking at potentially, getting it up on your website. So obviously if you've got a website and you kind of have the ability to update some of those pages, get it up there. We've mentioned already LinkedIn, and you can obviously put that up there actually as a downloadable guide potentially as well on there, and a link back to that page. It may be that you create a landing page. So something like clickfunnels.com or unbounce.com allows you the ability to build out these temporary landing pages. So you can host these landing pages on there. And ultimately as well, you have the opportunity within HubSpot. So we've spoken about HubSpot obviously a lot on this show over the weeks. But that's another area that you could kind of start to push out some of this content as well. If you want to start leveraging this content, as we mentioned just previously, as far as gating it potentially. And by gating it, we mean, you need to give something to essentially download that content. So it may be an email or a mobile or answering a few questions. HubSpot has that ability to gate some of that content for you as well, and start to build out that process. So that's down to you, obviously, if you want to gate the content or if you just want to put it out there. I think we'd recommend, to get some value associated to this time that you've spent on producing it. I'd recommend gating it just by an email or something.
Yeah, and then the other thing, if you haven't got the capabilities of putting it on your website, there's a platform called issuu.com, which is issw.com. And issue is really good. So again, we'll touch on issue when we get into the next section on magazines. But what issue allows you to do is go in there, upload PDFs, right? So again, from Canva, you can download directly into PDF. Go into issue, upload the PDF, and now what you've got is kind of like a flippable guide. Flippable user experience where basically you can share that. Right, and you can share the link. You can post that on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever platform you want to use. You can also, if you do want to even still use issue and pull it back into your website, that whole flippable format, you can basically just copy some code in. Again, very simple, and then you can start to embed that content back into your website as well. So again, a couple of different options in terms of, once you've got a downloadable guide, what can you do with it? And again, one of the benefits with Issue is they've got a huge distribution network based on their traffic. So if anyone goes onto that platform or is searching on Google for, I don't know, like an ebook on whatever it is, car parts, for example, Issue will rank very highly inside of Google, and that will drive traffic and awareness again back to your content. again, with all of this stuff though, just make sure that it's branded, right? Make sure you've got your logo on there and ways for people to reach you.
Yeah.
We touched on magazines. Should we talk about that, Andrew?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think we've taken it kind of to the next level, I guess, of kind of that written content. You know, and you know, through using things like Issue that you've just mentioned there. You know, in Canva, we've now kind of created a monthly publication, right?
Yeah. So what we've again, and this goes back to repurposing content. So what we've done is, so content guys are kind of looking at the best performing blog articles that are being written. So we try to publish at least kind of one blog article a day as part of our kind of content strategy. But what we do is at the end of every week or every month, we look at which articles are performing the best. And by performing the best, we look at kind of simple metrics, but how many people have seen the article, and then how much time was spent reading the article. And then we'll look at things like comments and likes and all that kind of stuff as well. But if we feel as if, you know, maybe 7 or 8 of those articles have performed really well, that will form the foundation for a new magazine that we've launched. So issue 2, I think, is coming out next week now. But essentially, we have maybe between 8 to 10 different articles a month. We do rewrite them from a kind of magazine format perspective very slightly. But essentially, we're still using 80% of the content that we created in the blog article, packaging it up differently again, and putting a magazine format in there. You can do on Canva, but again, we've chosen to do that with just one of our designers who's working on that from a template perspective. But once that's done, and again, because we have an account with Issue, very easy to kind of publish it on Issue and then kind of distribute it out. So again, I think it's just something very very interesting. I think people are very open to kind of digesting magazines and that kind of content. Sometimes maybe, you know, not very keen on reading blog articles, but you know, we give them another kind of way of digesting that same content.
Yeah, it sometimes feels a bit unnatural on your laptop to run through blogs, but it's interesting when people kind of download on an iPad or Kindle or whatever, right? You kind of it just feels more natural, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think the other thing with Issue as well, if you do create something that has value, a lot of these tools allow you to kind of monetize that as well. So if you wanted to, you know, get subscribers, get people paying for that content, again, these kind of options are available as well, right? So again, just depends on what kind of route you want to go down.
Yeah, I think just again, that's ISSW. That's the website, right?
Yes. Yeah, check it out if you've never seen it before.
Perfect.
Cool. Should we talk about podcasts?
Definitely. Yeah. I think go straight in. You know, so we've been, obviously, this has been now kind of converted into a podcast, but prior to that, we're part of a kind of the development team of and the founding partners of something called Podaholics, which is a podcast network here. And we've been podcasting, you know, for the best part of 5 years. So interestingly enough, from a recording perspective, you know, just this show, Zoom, if you're doing a show like this, Zoom gives you a separate audio file. So you're able to take a file from here. So that's a great way to get a podcast up and running and going. YouTube is also, interestingly enough, you know, people do listen to podcasts on YouTube and watch them, obviously, but you can just put an image up and just have an audio file running through there as well, because, you know, a lot of it has to do with things like Joe Rogan, you know, putting up huge podcasts on Adam Carolla on YouTube and getting massive traction. But a lot of people do listen to podcasts on YouTube. So I think those are kind of some of the two non podcast specific platforms that are obviously still incredibly helpful. Then you start to get into some of the ones that we use. So we actually use Anchor. Anchor is an application that's owned by Spotify. So Spotify obviously is a music streaming platform, and they own Anchor. So Anchor is an application, it's also a website you can download. Excuse me. You can record a podcast in there, but then ultimately you can kind of distribute it as well. Then it's free. There's a few that are paid. So you've got things like Libsyn, Libsun, Buzzsprout as well as another platform, Podomatics. These guys not only will allow you to record, but also distribute as well. And we'll kind of talk about a bit that in the end, but they will allow you to record them. So you can obviously do that on there. But the other part of kind of just recording a podcast is the editing. So getting into, as you mentioned, the kind of getting more involved. For example, for our podcast now, so I kind of do a bit of small editing on GarageBand. So I'm on a Mac, and that's the software that I prefer to use. So very, 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 might I say, basic editing skills. Just doing a little intro and outro. Music to the podcast. That's obviously good. And Adobe Audition. So Adobe Audition is another one that's a great platform. Paid subscription on there. Audacity, which is another platform, but that's free. So again, from an editing perspective, allows you to edit these podcasts. And the editing really is, you may want to edit, just kind of intro music, outro music. You may want to drop in some little idents. But I guess, we can't really talk about some of this editing without a super creepy, super scary platform called Dscript. And obviously, I think Amit, do you want to talk about Dscript?
Yeah, so guys, check this out, because this will blow your minds if you haven't already seen it. So it's called Dscript. It's a Descript. It's a relatively new platform, but essentially allows you to edit videos, edit podcasts, any audio files. I mean, anything like that, but with a twist. So the challenge with again, some of these things, especially when they're live, is okay, you might say something and you kind of regret saying it later, or whatever it is, right? Maybe you want to kind of edit a word out or whatever, and it's very kind of difficult to do so. Dscript makes it very easy, because as soon as you upload the content into Dscript, a transcript of that content basically gets displayed. And then if you say, actually, I just want to remove that kind of word or that sentence, literally it's like pressing delete and after kind of highlighting something on Word, right? And then your audio file automatically kind of gets updated. But the creepy part is, what if you forgot to say something, right? So if there was something that was like very critical, but you forgot to mention it, you can just type it in, and Dscript will use your kind of voice information that it's picked up from that audio file, and basically in natural kind of language will say what you've just typed in, and kind of include it as part of that kind of podcast or audio file. And I've tested it. I tested it because I wanted to try and see. I didn't believe it when I saw it. I was like, it can't be that. And it really is phenomenal. I mean, it was absolutely mind blowing. But
so you're
but
creating
again,
your own deep fakes.
yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. Yeah, you might want to kind of listen to the next podcast. You're going to be saying a whole load of really nice things about me, I think.
That's it, yeah.
But the key to it is it's super easy to use. I mean, like, again, going back to, let's not kind of involve IT, let's not kind of involve technical people. If we can do it ourselves, it's just going to be easier, right? And this is a tool which I just think is going to be so big. I think it's only been around for a few months, but I think they've just raised like a huge sum of money in the States, and San Francisco based. They've got kind of access to all of that, but yeah, just very cool. Yeah, so definitely kind of check that out. And then when you've got the final product, Andrew, how do people get podcasts out there? How do you get listeners?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I mean, I think obviously, so there's some distribution platforms. So you basically want to grab an RSS feed, which Anchor and everything will give you, and you can distribute it manually. So you can go into iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Apple, Google, etc. or you can use Anchor, Libsyn, Buzzsprout, and these platforms will actually distribute it for you. So, for example, Audible has just started including podcasts, and obviously it's a massive network, but there's only a couple at the moment. It is super difficult to get in there. So that's, for example, you'd possibly use Libsyn. So that's one thing that just came through last week, where you can't actually manually add it anywhere. It's quite difficult. So you can use these as, distribution networks, where you put in your RSS feed and it gradually kind of distributes, and you go live in these various platforms. And it's pretty easy to check. You can go into Apple Music and just search for your show and find it. And obviously, a lot of these distribution networks and or platforms is down to personal choice and the kind of essentially the analytics they start to provide you in the end. So for example, Anchor is free. It gives you analytics, but we don't necessarily know where these people are listening. We know where they're listening from, what they're listening to, but we may not know if they're on Apple, for example, or Google, right? Or Deezer, or Spotify, or so you may have to kind of manually go in and check these.
Yeah.
So yeah, just keep an eye on that.
Yeah, but I mean, Anchor's great. I mean, just because it does distribute it to so many different networks, you don't have to do anything, right?
Totally. And when with Podaholics, obviously James Pikeway, who had the show, he's heavily involved in that, in the recording, and he has a whole deck and everything. When he disappeared last summer, for example, for his annual summer vacation, myself and some of the other Podaholic guys, Glenn and Colin and Dr. Jenna, we just used Anchor. So the actual application didn't have a mic, didn't have anything, just off the phone, bang, all good. Anchor is obviously, top drawer. I definitely recommend that.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Last 10 minutes, Andrew. Should we talk about webinars? Yeah. Shows like this, perhaps.
Yeah. I think we've kind of differentiated webinars and shows in the sense webinars. It's a webinar. Then I haven't done that for months.
Amazing.
That's because I've got a cold and I'm on medication and I'm drugged up. Webinars. So for webinars, obviously use some of the time for top of funnels to generate some interest in potentially a product or service or conference, versus something like a show that we do, obviously. But there is a lot of different platforms out there, but just two of the ones that we feel are probably quite possibly the strongest. Zoom. So we've been incredibly happy with Zoom from day one. They've made minor improvements, obviously, along the way from the webinar piece, but definitely worthwhile looking at a platform, and from an investment perspective, relatively inexpensive. And then another one which is good is Webinar Jam. So those guys, haven't just jumped on the bandwagon, and they've been involved in that webinar space. And again, it's got nice platform, nice features on there as well, to allow you to produce your own webinar, and then obviously stats associated to it. I believe Zoom definitely integrates into like HubSpot, but I think Webinar integrates into HubSpot as well. So if you want to kind of manage your distribution list, your sign up list, see who's signing up and watching, see who's signing up and watching later, as it were, tracking, who's engaged with your content. All of those are on there as well.
Okay, cool. And again, with kind of webinars and things like that, you've also got the option of live broadcasting, right, Andrew?
Yeah, it's something actually that we haven't. So we live broadcast. Obviously, we do this webinar live. For those of you listening, we do it live every week at 3 p.m. UAE time on a Tuesday. But they're obviously, at the moment, we haven't actually tapped into some of the other platforms from a live broadcast perspective. So you can live broadcast across to YouTube, live broadcast across to Facebook and Instagram, and you can do that, just matter of fact. So you can use some different tools. There's one called StreamYard, which you can integrate into, and kind of from Zoom you can actually connect your accounts as well. There's another one called Crowdcast that allows you to do this as well. Now, for something like LinkedIn, you do need to be approved for that. So for LinkedIn, you need to have approval. and you gain that approval through other live broadcasts. So, for example, if we wanted to make the decision to live broadcast to LinkedIn, we'd start doing live broadcasts to YouTube, Facebook. That's what it counts as. But you can use StreamYard and Crowdcast to help you facilitate that. We just connect your accounts and start streaming as well.
Okay, cool. And then from an editing perspective, easy to edit,
there's some cool stuff out there. So you've spoken about Dscript already. Dscript has some great editing tools on there to allow you to edit your video content. Probably one of the best free online ones. I use iMovie, so for kind of on the Mac, I use iMovie just for small editing. But one of the best free ones online is vid.io, so VEED.io. Very powerful kind of video editing platform in the cloud space. And there's also another cool one called wave.video. And what that does is it kind of chops up your content and allows you to distribute it across your socials. So if you kind of want to do a 15-minute, run through, or 15-minute promo, 15-second promo of your content, you can use wave.video to produce this as well. So it's quite easy to use. Vid.io and all these guys are all drag and drop environments, same like iMovie. And if someone like me can do this video editing, trust me, anyone can do it. These tools are very, very simplistic and very helpful. I would like to say that in all honesty, when I first started this, I did call Mr. Pikeway or Professor Pikeway quite a lot. Help. But there's plenty of YouTube videos out there if you kind of want to watch on how to edit as well.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. And then from a publishing perspective, obviously you've mentioned things like YouTube, but that's your obvious one, right? I mean, you've got a video. Where you're going to host it? I mean, it's probably where most people who are watching or consuming videos go, right?
Yeah, I'd say so. If you're throwing it up on YouTube, create your own channel. So you can create your own channel on there. YouTube obviously is well known. Vimeo is another popular video platform that allows you to create a channel and put your content up there. You can obviously put it on your own website. So we use a platform called Wistas to host our videos and then embed them on the website, just because it gives us a bit more trackability on those video views. But you can obviously just upload the videos on your own platform. You can use other social platforms as well, so you can throw up these videos on Facebook, on the longer form videos on IGTV. So you can put them up on there, obviously. And LinkedIn does allow video content, but only short form video content. So there is a limitation on the video on LinkedIn at the moment.
It's about 10 minutes, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like 15 minutes, I think, something like that. Okay. So, but for the shorter form videos, you have an opportunity. You may want to do a promo reel or something like that. So again, all of these platforms to distribute, to publish is free. Get your content up there and just to kind of start getting it out,
Yeah, and like I said, try and with all of the stuff that we're talking about, the nice part of it is you can get kind of analytics on all of these, right? And again, you don't have to kind of go deep into those numbers and analytics, but again, if you get an idea in terms of views, listens, even if it's kind of social analytics that go with it, number of likes or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I mean, use that information, right? I mean, again, don't sort of stress over it if it's not, if you launch one thing and people don't kind of view it. I mean, a lot of this has to sort of, be continuous and think about it from that kind of sustainable approach perspective. But look at the numbers and let that kind of guide you in terms of what content you create next, what people are perhaps interested in, and kind of go for it that way.
Yeah, I think one thing to remember is if you look at all the kind of, if we put it back to comic book, like origin stories of content creators and people that do produce a lot of content and companies that produce content, everyone says you need to kind of, have at it, as far as don't just start and stop, even if the numbers are perhaps not where you want them to be, be consistent, keep creating content, and play with it. So play with the format. Look, even our own show has evolved, right, Amit? We're only, we're only 26 episodes in, but if you go back, and especially if you listen, those early shows were actually driven by PowerPoint. We had a few slides in there. We've done interviews. We've played with the format. So I think the thing is, you because you are effectively be giving away this content for free. We never monetize any of our content, but you do have the ability to, I guess, play with it, right? And see the different format, and it's got to work for you. It's got to work for you and your audience, right? It's obviously that's an important part, but I wouldn't get too hung up on those kind of early stages of, well, how many views am I getting, how many listens am I getting, who's reading it, how many visits to the site am I getting. I think it's just about being consistent, and producing that content, because what happens is, as soon as people start to engage with the content, they go back, and we see it. They go back and they find you, just like when you find a show or you find a podcast, a new podcast. I'm in the process of listening to a new podcast, and they're on episode 40, and I'm going back and listening to all of the previous podcasts, right, that have gone out.
Yeah, and we've seen that with our shows and others that we're involved in as well, for sure. Yeah, that definitely happens. Cool, Andrew. It's 1 minute to 4, so we're actually looking good for once, time-wise. Guys, if you've got any kind of last minute or last second questions, squeeze them in and send them over to us now. If not, you can always send it through to us. Is it digitalgrowthshow@digitalnexa.com or growthshow@digitalnexa?
Growthshow@digitalnexa.com. Yeah.
So growthshow@digitalnexa.com. And obviously the podcast as well. So, thanks to everyone who's kind of been listening. Thanks to everyone who's joined us today and watching. But again, you can find the podcast on, I think, all of the major platforms
everywhere.
Now. Everywhere. Good work.
I think even on Alexa, actually. So I didn't test it, but it should be on Alexa now, because it's on TuneIn. So if you ask to listen to the Digital Growth Show on TuneIn on Alexa, it will come through. Yeah.
That I did test, because I wanted to impress my my little niece, who's not impressed by anything, and still wasn't impressed. But never mind. But it works. That's a key.
Important thing, it works.
It works. Okay, awesome. So again, perfect. Thanks a lot, guys. Yeah.
Thanks for listening. Have a great week, and we'll catch you guys next week. Thanks, Amit.
All right. Cheers. Thanks, Andrew.
See ya. Bye.